Hello everybody, welcome back to the James Lawrence Allcott channel. That's right, Allcott's got another problem. What is with this guy? This one is actually a proper problem, right? I have a problem with Manchester United because I can't figure out, are they good? Are they good? I mean, they're good, but are they good? I just don't know. And I've been diving into the thought process of why I think that. And I think it's down to a few things. And that's what we're going to look at in this video. We're going to look at a book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow and how that's maybe affecting it. That's been the trigger for this video in terms of me trying to establish my thoughts on this. But really, I want to talk to you guys about this because I've got questions and I don't know what the answer is. And I need you to help me out with it. So join me on this little journey of exploring the idea of thinking fast and slow, the idea of framing, the idea of what's coming into our brains from external forces, and the power of expectation as well. A lot of interesting thoughts here that we're going to dive into. Before we get into the video, we are flying with the channel at the moment, and I can't believe it, and it's got nothing to do with me. It's down to you guys moving your mouse and clicking the button. Look, I didn't want to say it until we got to 80k, but we're now at 86k. I want 100k on this channel. I really do. It would mean so much. I can't even tell you. I don't know why, and there's probably deeper thoughts on that. That's another video for another time, but I would just love to get to 100k, but I can't do it. You guys can get me there by moving your mouse and hitting the subscribe button. So if by the end of this video you feel like you've enjoyed it and maybe check out another one, and if you enjoy that as well, then please do consider subscribing. And of course, let's have a like total for this one. It's been working well for us recently. Can we get 5,000 likes on this video, which is going to be an exploration of where Man United are. So let's dive into it. And let's talk about the trigger first for me in terms of this video and kind of establishing what I think my problem is with Man United. My problem with Man United is I don't know if they're good or not. Why don't I know that? Is that due to the sort of media elements of it, or is it down to my own biases? And I think there are some biases in that, which we're going to explore in this video. But then I've been listening to a new audiobook. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow. And there's some really interesting points on this, right? So the book came out in 2011. A lot of you guys, I'm sure, have probably read it already. Thinking Fast and Slow. And it's from a guy called Daniel Kahneman, who is a very smart dude. And he's talking about the idea that there are two systems of thinking. One that you just kind of react to without even thinking about it. The idea that if a car's coming flying by, you'll get out the way with it even thinking about it. And the second system is a lot more deliberate and logical. You're kind of taking your time to work through, for example, a maths equation. Here are 3 good lessons you know from what's going on up here. The idea of those systems. System 1, system 2. So your behavior is determined by 2 systems in your mind, one conscious and the other automatic. Your brain is lazy and thus keeps you from using the full power of your intelligence. And the final one, again, another video for another time. When you're making decisions about money, leave your emotions at the door. And so with that idea in mind, when I'm thinking fast about Man United, I think that they're failing. I think that this is a club that's struggling, it's not exceeding its expectations, it's not even meeting its expectations, because of the natural things that come to me straight away. First of all, trophies. Man United have won more trophies than any other club, I think, right? Certainly Premier League trophies. So when you think of Man United, you think of them winning trophies. Anything beneath that is failure, right? And again, that's a kind of blanket, quick thought that isn't truly fair if you're looking at any team, really. But the problem is, with Man United, you have that element of the trophies. You then look at something like the wage bill. And if you go back, this is a website called Spot Track, which seems to put together the payroll for these different clubs. If you look at their estimated total salaries, Man United top by a huge amount. Again, things that we know about football on its basic level is that the team that spends the most money has the best team. In terms of the salaries of these players that are coming to Man United, they're far and above. And if you look at different years, let's go back to 2017-18. The same will remain. Man United at the top by quite a way. You go again into the next season. Honestly, pick any of these recent seasons. At the top of the tree, when it comes to estimated total salaries, Manchester United is spending the most money. And so if they're spending the most money, again, they should be winning titles, right? They should be, blowing this league away. The third thing is the pundits, I think. The pundits is a massive problem. And we've seen this before in a whole generation of Liverpool pundits, the likes of Alan Hansen, Mark Lawrence, and Graham Souness, when he was, not the third guy on the panel, he's the first guy. Players that go, in my day, a club like Liverpool Football Club, the same thing is happening right now. The likes of Rio Ferdinand, the likes of, you could chuck Michael Owen in there, but really I'm talking about Roy Keane, Gary Neville. the top pundit of all of these big channels is a Man United player and supposed fan, and their expectations of how they look at their football club, and therefore the expectations that they put out there, generally are of a club that's expected to win trophies and to dominate leagues, which again is understandable. But this then bleeds into our thought processes, I think. Maybe I'm wrong here, and let me know in the comments below if you disagree with me. But I think this leads to another thing that comes from that book of Thinking Fast and Slow, is the idea of framing. Framing's really important in life in terms of how you sort of see things. If you watch the news, you'd think that there is no good things in life, because what's being framed there are the worst parts of life, because they're newsworthy, right? And so, for me, I think the framing of Manchester United, when you've got Roy Keane making blanket statements, less so Rio Ferdinand and Gary Neville, but you look at, say, someone like Paul Scholes comes onto, and he's expecting trophies, he's expecting dominance, because that's the world and the team that he knew. But this isn't the world or the team that these Man United players know. And so what comes from that are these higher expectations, this high level of framing that other teams don't have. So this is where it starts to get a little bit confusing for me, okay? Because I think what you're seeing over the last 2 seasons is a mix between the bad side of expectation and the good side of expectation. So let me explain this to you. The bad side of it for me comes from that framing, comes from all those pundits, comes from the talking points of a lot of these players, these ex-legends, which understandably it's not their fault, but that's the way they put their ideas across, because they know what success looks like, and that's what they're expecting. And expectations are a very dangerous thing if you go above and beyond what is comfortable for you, if it's not an agreed expectation, right? As is said here in therverywellmind.com, finally our expectations can get the better of us when we expect more than what is realistic in a given situation. The power of expectation is a fascinating thing in itself, because as I did some research on that and the idea of how the expectations can affect a person, it actually got much deeper than that. It was mad, because there's an experiment from Bob Rosenthal. He made an experiment back in the day where late one night he crept into his research lab and hung signs on all the rat cages. Some signs said that the rat inside the cage was incredibly smart, while others said that the rat inside was incredibly dumb. Stick with me, guys. Even though neither of these things were true. They were very, very average rats that you would buy from a research institute to sell rats for a living. Okay, I've said the word rats enough. But what was interesting about this, though, was that you assigned the next day to different scientists different rats who had different labels on them. The expectations were higher on certain ones than other ones. And the conclusion that came from the results from these experiments was that, in fact, the expectations were met by the smart rats, which weren't smart rats, and the dumb rats, dropped down. And the reason behind that, supposedly, was the ability from the scientist to infiltrate through their thoughts and their, those otherworldly elements in their being and their body language to affect the rats themselves, because of their thought process, because of their expectations. So, with the power of expectations and this idea that your thought process and your feeling towards these kind of elements are going to impact the players themselves, what I find really interesting now is maybe Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, although his coaching at times has been questionable, what he does have is a really nice balance, I think, where there's a kindness to him, but there's also a high level of expectation. And so what you've seen in the results of Man United this season is a team that, when the expectations were really high right at the start of the season, I think you had a playing squad there that wasn't in line with it. They didn't feel comfortable with it, and the results showed. They were terrible, right? Once it got to that point where it really, really dipped and the expectations dropped somewhat, we've seen this so many times. Whenever Solskjaer's needed a victory, you've seen that upturn in form. And I think when it comes to expectations of this Man United team and the players that are slowly growing with them, the mix of the two of them are something that's quite exciting for Man United fans, because I think at times they're sort of falling over and stumbling. But again, you look at the moment when they get to the top of the table, that's when the form again starts to tail off. So there's this battle, I think, between the high expectations of the media, of the fans, and less so, I think, the fans than the media. And then you've got the high expectations of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but his understanding of where they should be. that are dragging Man United to higher heights. And that's why I think in these big games, they haven't conceded many goals after that 6-1 defeat, because they've been pushing their own expectations. They've been raising their game to those expectations, like that experiment that Bob Rosenthal was talking about, that if you set these certain levels of expectations, and maybe we look at the playing squad of a Leicester City and a Manchester United and the expectations of both, and maybe actually sometimes the pressure is really hurting those teams like a Man United, but at the same time they're kind of dragging them up again as well, whereas Leicester City, the sort of burden of those expectations when they get to those pressure points of being in the Champions League places, that's what's hurting them. For Man United, a similar thing happens, I think, when they get to that top spot. That's what's hurting them. That's where they feel much more confident as an underdog at this moment in time. So we've spoken about System 1. System 1 was the idea of those quick thoughts, that quick thought on Man United. What I'm struggling with at the moment, which is the idea that, well, they should be winning the league. But then if I stop myself for a second and I use System 2 in this, I think I'm starting to get towards what is the correct decision on if Man United are really good or not. Because when you look at the stats here, and you can see them right now, this is right now, 28 games gone so far at the moment, 54 points. A season ago, let's have a look, they found themselves with 41 points. So they've gone up 14 points. Now, look, this is a pinch of salt. We always know that when it comes to XG. But in terms of expected points last season, they actually underperformed. They were unlucky, supposedly, according to the stats. And they should have been on 49 points at this moment in time, right? And if we go back to the current table for Manchester United, again, they're actually overachieving a little bit this time. So they're on 54 points, and supposedly they should be on 47 points. And so I think the mix of the two is really, really interesting. And it highlights, again, that you're not always wrong with your fast thoughts, which is the idea that, are they good? I'm not sure if they're good just yet. I think they're a little bit better. I think they're made of sterner stuff. I think they've got players that have developed and moved forward, like McTominay, Fred, Luke Shaw, so many of those players. I think all of them are kind of a year older and a year wiser. But are they miles better than they were before? I'm not totally sure. But they're a little bit more, they've got a bit more substance to them this time. And that kind of, when I slow down and use System 2, which is the idea of being slow and logical, looking at the stats, or hang on, look at the XG, look at the expected points, you find yourself looking at it and going, yes, okay, they've got 14 more points this time, and they're playing with a bit more conviction, which means they may be going above their XG at the moment, a bit more confidence, again, a bit more experience, again, so making the right decisions. And so, you know, when we look at XG, and I know we're always careful with that and take it with a pinch of salt, that they're exceeding it this time, and last season they were having a few moments where they were maybe a little bit unlucky, or again, a lack of conviction and confidence. But the final point that has to be made is that they weren't that bad last year. They are a little bit better this year. And the interesting thing for me is that going back to those expectations, I think you've seen the players grow and understand the expectations of Manchester United Football Club and what is expected. You know, that sounds obvious, right? But where they need to go. Do they have the belief to be top of the tree? Not yet. I think that's been proven. Not in the sort of defensive side of it, that it's still hard to break down and hard to beat. But in terms of maybe the competence going forward, they still haven't got that yet. And that's why in a game like Man City, it's down to their ability to play on the counter-attack and take the handbrake off in that moment instead of to really dominate a game. Because that's going to be the next level that they need to jump up to. But for me, I think if you to put a formula together for Man United to understand, are they truly good, is to say, I think they are good, but I still think they're 2 players away from being a team that can win the title, that can get to 90 points, which is probably what you're going to need to do to combat against a Man City time, because the level of expectations to be a champion now has changed. This isn't the Premier League of 10 years ago, where you could get 83 points and you'd be okay, plucking out of the air. Now you need to get yourself 90 points. So for Man United to do that, they need a team that believes in the expectations of the wider club and feels comfortable with them. And I think they're 2 players away, alongside the growth of the club, of the players that are there right now, to get themselves there. That's where I'm at on this one at the moment. You know, I think it's interesting that my gut feeling and then when I broke it down were actually kind of similar. But what do you guys think? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you don't mind me babbling on about these different ideas and theories. And if you are enjoying them, as I said, hit that subscribe button and hit the like button. Can we get 5,000 likes on this video? It'd be fantastic. Stay tuned on the channel. We're going to have lives coming up after games where we look at tactical analysis and things like that, like we did for Man City, Man United. So if you haven't checked that out, go check out that video as well. And I'll see you next time.